All right, we're on. Welcome back to the Real Quick with Mike Swick podcast, episode number 52. Today we have a really cool guest, an old school fighter who's been through it all. He's fought everybody. He's done everything. I'm talking about Cub Swanson. This is a guy I've looked up to for many, many years. He's just a fun fighter to watch. He recently just got a huge win over Kron Gracie. So let's get to it. All right, Cub Swanson, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, I've always wanted to talk to you, and I haven't really had like a long conversation with you ever. And it's crazy because we're both kind of OGs, you know?
Yeah. Well, you're a little bit further than me on the OG status, but I was around when you were in the UFC. I don't know if you remember me at all, but
Yeah.
I used to hang around Joe Daddy all the time.
Yeah. Is that a polite way of telling me I'm old?
No.
You're a little bit ahead of me in the OG status.
Well, I'm just trying
That's
to
the nicest
give
anybody's
people-
ever told me I'm old before.
I'm trying to get everybody up to date on the timeline.
Yeah, I got you. When was so my first pro fight was in 1998, and I had 21 amateur fights before that. So I guess that would put me ahead of you. When was your first amateur pro, whatever, like MMA fight?
So I started training in 2003, and I had my first pro fight in 2004.
Gotcha. But you're younger
And I
than me too.
never had any amateur fights.
Yeah, you just went straight in.
Yeah, because in the California circuit, back then there really wasn't amateurs.
Yeah, you know the thing is like my amateur fights were they were just like the same as pro, I guess, because like it was just from Texas and so they just didn't want to pay you. So it was just like it was still just fights. It was just an excuse to not have to pay you for it, and then like you still had to fight probably the same level as pro back then. I mean, it wasn't like there was like a bunch of high level guys, you know, fully well-rounded in 1996, 97, you know?
Yeah.
Dude,
now they throw on like some shin pads and, you know, for the amateurs, kind of like ease you into it. I'm sure back then it was elbows, everything.
Yeah, dude,
same.
I was like a striker. And so like I didn't have very much on the ground back in those days. I was like 18 and stuff. And so I was that guy that wore like the red gi pants, like Chuck Norris and shit. So I had MMA as my first amateur MMA fights wearing like red gi pants, and it was just me defending the takedown from these like Gracie guys or like, you know, Gracie associated guys, you know, down the line or whatever, and like they're trying to take me down, I'm trying to like fight, and yeah, it was crazy, man. But man, yeah, you've been fighting for a long time. I have so much respect for guys like you that's been around for so long and been through so many great fights, man. Like just amazing great fights. Your last fight was incredible with Kron Gracie.
Thank you.
Like that was a great fight, man. Like you landed those body shots and they were so hard. Like you could hear them so loud, and you never gave up on him. And you know, even though you didn't get a reaction, he was obviously really tough. You just kept doing it, and for sure it was making an impact. He just wasn't showing it, you know, like you could see he would slow down. You could see he would like, it was making an impact, and you just kept going, man. You didn't stop and try to like change things around. You stuck to what was working, man, and you just 27-30, you know, you won everything.
Yeah. Well, you know, I took a couple lessons from the Ortega fight. I felt like I was in control of that fight, and then instead of pushing off, even Dana kind of teased me about it when we had a conversation later, like, man, you had that fight and why didn't you just push him away? And I was told to try to dominate every area, and in the clinch, I was pretty relaxed, and I just didn't see it coming. So I tried to take some lessons from that. And then, you know, when I fought Kron, I knew that he did, you know, triathlons, and they do a lot of long distance, and I know that he's not very explosive. In fact, from what I understand, they don't do anything explosive. They're like, they train slow but long duration, and I'm explosive. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, I'm obviously going to be faster and more explosive than him the first 2 rounds. But if I can't get him to slow down, then he's going to eat me up in the third if he can withstand it.
Right.
So I needed to attack his body, attack his legs, you know, get him a little tired. So that way, when I get tired, he's tired with me, you know, and because if I wouldn't have done that, then I would have really struggled in the third round because he has a tank.
Yeah. You were damaging that tank though. And Yeah, you could clearly see that, like you said, man, he was kind of slow. Like his boxing was really slow compared to you, and when he got in, it was like at the end of his punches, it wasn't as hard, and you were just landing
Hmm.
power bombs. And it's crazy because when these new fights happened, this UFC 249 and the fights after, where it's like there was no audience. Some of the biggest shock, I guess, to the fans was like to actually hear those shots landing, and like there's no audience, there's not a lot of noise, and like say, wow, man, it's way more impactful when you hear those shots actually landing. But in your fight, anybody that saw your fight with Kron, they were already used to it, man, because you could literally hear those shots like it was no different than if there was nobody in that audience. It
Yeah,
was
it was
crazy.
crazy. I remember hitting them and thinking, man, that was one of the loudest shots I've heard myself because I remember it echoing in the arena.
Yeah,
And then people were telling me after, and I was like, right? That was crazy.
yeah.
But yeah, he just took it like a champ and just kept marching forward. So, I
I
got to
started
give
I,
him props.
I started thinking, I was like, man, is he hitting his arm or his bicep? Because I mean, he's hitting them so hard. Like, how is he taking those shots? And then I would notice, like, before the replays, obviously, I would notice that he had those red whelps on his stomach and his side and everything, and you were landing them. And then, of course, the replays. So hats off to him for being tough, man. But you stuck to a great game plan, and coming off a few rough fights there. Um, you must have felt really good to get that win, especially over someone like him, undefeated and on the rise like that, to be able to dominate like you did, 30-27.
Yeah. You know how this sport is. It can be, you have the highest highs and lowest lows. So,
Yeah,
when you're on a 4-fight losing streak, that, even though I was facing tough guys,
tough.
it's a tough pill to swallow. And then to factor in, I've been doing it a long time, so people are already like, "Oh, you're getting old." And then I had 3 kids really fast, so the during that time of the losses, I got married, had 3 kids, I moved, I changed camps, different corners, like just so many changes all at once. I really just kept telling myself it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal, but I'm sure it messed with me a little bit, just the comfort and the confidence going into a fight, knowing that everything is good.
Yeah,
But just having the kids was something I really wanted to take on because I've been so selfish in my 20s and my early 30s, like giving everything to the sport and trying to wow people over and over and say, man, I'm going to come back stronger, and I'm just going to come back stronger again and again. And now I have this extra responsibility of the kids. And, I'm like my last training camps, I've been changing, 5, 6 diapers a day.
oh
It's like,
wow,
me and my wife, we share responsibilities, and I
that's
ask her to
awesome.
do about 10 to 20% more when I'm in camp, and just because I want a little bit more time, but I'm still doing all my dad duties. So I mean,
Yeah,
I'm happy about that.
and that must take a little bit, like your mind a little bit away from the game a little bit, which is good sometimes to just kind of think about something else, especially children. So you would say that definitely changed your perspective a little bit and helped you out as far as overall mentality, your mentality for fighting and competing.
I think the thing is, I think one of the hardest things about fighting, and if you're going to have like a long career, it's like when I fought when I was 20 years old, when I turned pro and I went down to Tijuana and fought some dude and got $200. Like,
Yeah,
I was like, okay, yeah. I just wanted to give it a shot. And my reasons for doing that were completely different than 10 fights down the road, 10 more fights after that. So now you have to like reinvent, like, who you are as a fighter. You have to get in your own head and say, well, these are my reasons. In the beginning, maybe you're like an angry young kid and you just want to punch something,
yeah,
and
yeah,
prove that you're worth something. And then you do that. And then you make money and you do these things. Well, why are you still doing it? And you have to ask yourself those questions. You're like, well, I love it. Okay,
yeah.
and what's your motivation? I hate to lose, and I got a family to support. So that new motivation is just a different mentality that you have to get ready for when you're ready for your fight. So it just plays with you because it's not the way it used to be, when the
Right.
way that you got used to going through the motions of getting ready for a fight. Now it's different, and
Yeah.
you have to adjust. But that's life, though, right?
Everything. Yeah. So coming off that win, now you're back. on the winning side with a big win like that. What are you looking at? Like, I know you didn't say anything in the post fight about another fight or what you were looking at to do. What's on your mind? Like, what are you wanting to do next?
So right after that, I competed in that Quintet Ultra
Okay.
because they asked me to represent WEC, and I was like, man, WEC is everything to me. That's how I got my start. So I was in, and unfortunately, when I was grappling with, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now, but I blew out my ACL and my meniscus.
Oh
Jake
shit.
Shields. I was grappling Jake, and I don't usually grapple big guys, and so I grapple a lot with 10th Planet and Gracie Barra, and I go with a lot of guys that get me in the similar position, and he had me in a reap, and I can always get away. I can always slide out with guys my size, but I underestimated his length and strength,
Yeah.
and so when I tried to slide out, I kind of really like elongated my leg, and when he tried to sweep me, my knee just tore.
Yeah.
So I had surgery about a week before Christmas, and I've been just consistently rehabbing. So I'm about 5 months since I tore it, and so won't be able to fight till the end of the year. But I'm excited to get back. Once again, I'm trying to, be better than I ever was before, because that's was my goal from the beginning. Like, I'll stop when I start sucking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, as long as I can keep improving and keep showing that I'm making improvements, then I'll keep fighting. And as long as I keep loving it.
Absolutely. And you got honors for that fight, right, with Kron?
Fight of the night, yeah.
Fight of the night, yeah. Nice. Awesome. Well, then
Yeah.
that tells you right there. And it's amazing to me at your weight to be battling someone like Jake. Jake used to come in and train with us at AK on like sparring day. And
Yeah.
and between us back in our prime, it was me and Koscheck and Fitch and Jake, and as far as sparring goes. And he was just my nemesis, man. He was the hardest guy to like deal with because of course, like, the stand up was there, but he had decent kicks. I mean, he wasn't like, he was no scrub on the feet,
Yeah.
but man, when he would get you down and he would do it from the clinch or whatever and just drag you down as, however he can. And when he
Yeah.
gets on the ground, man, like you said, he's so strong and so good. It's like he's a good level. I mean, I know you're a black belt as well, but with that size difference, I can imagine like, because I'm
Yeah.
sure he came in pretty big for that. I'm sure he didn't cut. So it
Yeah.
was,
But I knew I grappled him before he came down to CSW, Eric Paulson's back in the day, and we sparred and rolled a bunch of times, and so I felt what it was like. I felt very comfortable standing, but when he shot in and got it to the ground, he just passes the guard and goes for head and arm chokes, and I had a hard time defending it because he was a lot bigger than me. He's long, he's
yeah,
strong. So I just knew that when we grappled, I was like, I can't get underneath of him. As long as he doesn't get on top of me, I'm very confident. Because he had just grappled Mark Munoz, who
yeah,
was huge at the time, and so he was huffing and puffing. So I was like, I'm just gonna keep pushing him,
yeah,
and then I'm gonna go for a submission at the end. And he started pulling guard at the end because he was tired, and I was like, okay, this is right where I want it to be. And then we went in a heel hook position, but there was no heel hooks. And then he went for the reap, and it tore my knee. And I was just like, no,
oh,
this was supposed to be a fun thing. Like,
yeah.
I was riding this momentum, wanting to fight again, and here we are. I go back to the drawing board.
That's crazy, man. And then like, yeah, for me it was like his takedowns, like it was so different than your conventional wrestlers. And like it wasn't about like I can let guys come in and take me down and then I can make contact and I can still defend the takedown. I can shove the head, I can sprawl out, I can do things.
Yeah,
But when he comes in and he just has to get in, and even if it's sloppy or it's not proper technique as far as wrestling, like your conventional wrestling double legs or whatever, when he grabs you, it's like you just can't get him off of, you know what I mean? Like once he
yeah,
touches you, it's like you can't do much because he's just gonna hold on to you and then turn to something else. And it's like he's one of the few people that could actually grab me or touch me on a takedown that I would just have a nightmare defending it. I mean, I was pretty much just going to the ground. And then when we were in sparring gear, forget about it. When I got shin pads on and big gloves, it was the most frustrating thing in the world because there's no way to get up from him when you got all this gear on too. And I couldn't hardly do it without, but with all that gear on, I was just like, ugh, just hated it, man.
Yeah, I feel you. So, I mean, yeah, he's crazy strong. He's not the most athletic, like agility wise, but he's strong and he'll push through. And that's when someone's a good grappler, those two things, that's hard to deal with.
And so how's your training now? Like, are you healing up from the injury, and are you getting back into the swing of things and training again?
Yeah, yeah, so yeah, it's been tough,
Hmm.
with this whole, lockdown situation
Yeah.
and the COVID, like, so right when I had the surgery, your muscles just kind of shut off. I don't know if you've had knee injury. Um, And so the whole thing, I'm trying to get my quad back. I'm trying to do all these things. I finally got to the point where I was doing physical therapy 3 times a week. And then I started doing personal training twice a week on shoulders and core. So I didn't lose that. I got to a point where I was doing 5 days a week and then starting to ride my bike at night. So I was doing 2 a days and I was really pushing it. And then this
Yeah.
whole thing happened and I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. And so
Yeah.
I just had to train myself. And it's tough because I got all the kids here, and,
Yeah.
but I feel like I did a really good job, and I'm back doing physical therapy twice a week, and I just started going back doing personal training today. But I've been doing some boxing stuff and trying to like test to see what I can do, what I can't do, what makes me sore, why does it make me sore. So yeah, it's been a mentally tough injury, and I've had a lot of injuries, but this one's just been tough because of how
Yeah.
long it's taking.
It's crazy. Like Koscheck blew my knee out before I fought. I was supposed to fight Eric Silva at UFC 134, and he blew my ACL, meniscus, and MCL, I think it was. And so it was like a trifecta, and it was like 910 days I was out. Like it was
Wow.
3 years, 3 years during my prime. That was that big gap I had in my UFC career. So like I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
exactly what you're talking about, how long it takes to heal, man. Because it would like start healing up, and I was trying to come to Thailand to start working on building a gym, and so I wasn't doing rehab like I should have. That caused more problems, delayed it more, and it was like 3 years, man, that I had to sit on the sidelines in the middle of my career because of this damn knee injury. So I totally can understand the frustration of having to heal those things. They're just so slow to heal, you know?
yeah, yeah. So I mean, luckily the UFC hooked me up. They got me right away at Curlin and Job in LA, and I had
Nice.
Dr. Kavitny did the job, and he did a great job. So I feel like between that and I did all the things they told me to do, and I didn't take any painkillers. Um,
Yeah. Sucks.
and I just use some really mild THC edibles consistently, and because I don't do painkillers, I think it's poison. So
Yeah.
I was able to get through it pretty good, and so yeah, it's a long process, and I'm almost there. I can't run, but I think my biggest thing I've been doing is I've been biking a lot. I have a
It's good.
Peloton, and I had like I don't do the classes. I just do like a free ride, and then I monitor my scores.
Right.
And so I had a score that I had beat, and none of my training partners could beat it for the Kron fight, and I just annihilated it last week. But then I like strained my calf and my hamstring because I was pushing like 90% out of 100 resistance, and they were like, "Yeah, don't do that anymore." So
Yeah. Be
I
careful,
was like, "All
man.
right, I'm getting stronger. I just need to pull back a little bit, and
See, that's that old school mentality, man. Like, yeah, I'll tell you, man. I'm 40, but I feel 50 sometimes. So take it easy, dude. Don't overdo it. But yeah, that's good with that low impact, on where you can work your legs
yeah,
without that pounding of running on the ground and even a treadmill, So that's good. That's definitely the way to go, I think.
yeah." So the only three pieces of equipment I have here at my house, I have a Airdyne bike, I
Nice.
have a Peloton, and I have a curved treadmill, the
Perfect.
really big ones. So like those three things, they're pretty low impact and pushes my cardio. And then, I own a couple gyms around here that I can go do the other stuff. But when I'm quarantined, I was able to do my
Yeah.
cardio and do the basics. So I was good.
Yeah, you've went through a lot, man. Like, so how many bones have you had broken in your career? Like, do you know? Like, because
Uh,
haven't you had your jaw like wired shut a couple times? And
Twice, yeah.
jeez, man.
Yeah. got flying knee in practice by Melvin Gillard, and then I got my jaw
Jeez.
broken when I fought Holloway. So yeah, I've had when Melvin kneed me, hit me right here in the cheekbone, and it crushed my cheekbone into pieces. It broke my orbital, my nasal, and my upper jaw. So right along my lip, I got hit, and when I took my mouthpiece out, all my teeth just in a row were kind of moving in, and I was like, man, that's not right.
That's not good. Yeah.
And like, it didn't knock me out or anything. I was just like, man, I got a headache. And
Yeah.
so I went and got it looked at, and they said, yeah, you just crushed your cheekbone. They were surprised I could still see because my eye was completely red. But yeah, I had no problems with my eyes. But I have a plate right here. I have 2 plates right here. Had the 2 broken jaws. I've had 11 broken hands. So I got a plate here, plate here, plate here.
So you're like
Yeah.
kind of like Iron Man, dude. I wish I had some
Yeah.
plates in my career, dude. I needed them. That's
Yeah. I
awesome.
mean,
That sucks
everyone's
though. You had so
afraid
many
to get
injuries.
everyone's afraid to get the plates, but all the plates that I got, I had somebody that was pretty good, and I've never had problems with them. They
It's
ache,
good.
but there's one, my left hand, you could see my knuckles like way down. I
Yeah.
broke this one 6 times, and it's too close to the knuckle, so they don't want to do it. But if I would have had a plate here, I would have only broken it once. So it's like,
Yeah.
I'd rather have the plate.
I remember talking to Melvin, who you just mentioned, and like he's like the same way. With like his hands have been broke so many times, his knuckles are like shoved back midway to his wrist. I remember like seeing
Yeah.
this. We were like fighting on the same card one time, and we were waiting to to do our checks or weigh in or something, and he was talking to me, and like his knuckles were like back here, and I was just like, wow. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's crazy.
you guys are tough, man. Yeah, yeah. So 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 I love asking guys like you, like these old school guys that's been in it for so long, not chasing the fame and money as much like the newer generation. What is it that got you into this? Like, when did you start martial arts, and then when did you decide, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna compete in this.
Yeah. So I played soccer my whole life. I thought that that's what I would do. I even like was on I made it to like the state qualifiers for the Olympic development program. And then I hadn't made it to the nationals yet because I broke my leg in half in high school playing soccer. And so that kind of derailed that. And then I started getting into trouble. Um, I had a rough teen years, ended up going to Juvenile Hall. And so when I got out, the only thing I could do was play soccer at my local junior college. And so I walked on, and I was a starting forward at 17. Um, but right after that, me and my brothers had to move out of my mom's house and get our own place and get a job and pay. I never had a job before. I never had to pay rent before and do all these
Yeah,
things. I was still 17. And so that was all new. And so doing that and doing my schoolwork wasn't, that was like the last thing on my mind. So I didn't play another year of soccer. And so I just kind of partied for a few years with my friends and was getting into trouble, like not getting into the trouble I was getting in before, because I just told myself I'd never go back to juvenile hall or jail or anything. And I just knew I would wake up feeling like side aches from drinking too much, and I was just
yeah,
like, man, I feel like a piece of crap. I need to do something differently. And so my friend told me about this place that had Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I was like, I don't know what that is, but I'll do it. Sure. In my mind, I thought I was going to go do something like Taekwondo. And I thought, you know, only black belts are probably going to beat me up because the rest of these guys are nerds. Like you see a lot of the guys that do martial arts. There's a lot of nerds that can do a kata, but they can't really fight.
yeah.
So I thought with my athleticism, I'd do fine. So I went into this jiu-jitsu place and saw that they were fighting on the ground. And I was like, this is different. And a white belt and a blue belt just rolled me up. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. This is some legit stuff. I've never heard of this. I've never seen it anywhere. So I was baffled. And from that point on, I just kind of went with it. And from that point on, I never did a hard drug in my life. I mean, at that point, I had smoked speed, crack, coke, acid. I just didn't give a fuck, you know?
Yeah.
And at that moment, it's been since that moment, I haven't done a hard drug.
But no painkillers.
And I say hard drug because THC. Yeah, I don't do painkillers.
But no painkillers. So you did all that. You did all that, but then you said painkillers are poison.
Yeah. Well, because I took painkillers when I've had a couple of my injuries, and they made me feel worse, you know?
Yeah. I know what you're saying.
They gave me Percocet and liquid codeine when I had my whole face thing, and I would wake up at 2 a.m. and dry heave in the toilet for 3 hours, and I was like, pain? I'll take pain. I can handle pain, but you're gonna give me I don't want these side effects.
Yeah,
I'd much rather have pain. Because for me, you know, we're a little crazy. We're wired different. If I don't feel pain, then I'm gonna go to the gym. So I need the pain to let me know, like, oh, you're hurting. You need to be in bed. You need to be at home. Because if I took something and it made me feel like, oh, I can go to the gym, I can do this, and they're like, no, you can't. So I need to feel that. I need to know where I stand.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. Like when you find yourself fighting in a cage for a living against other men, you know, somewhere down that path, you veered off. You know, we veered off the path a little bit somewhere, you know, to find ourselves inside of a cage, especially back in like 2000, 2002, 3, 4, you know, when there was plenty of other options than getting in cages and fighting people. So I definitely know what you're talking about. Trust me, man. I second guessed a lot as I was walking out to fight guys with like cut off shorts and mohawks many times to drunk fans that were throwing beer cans at us. So,
but it's that moment right there that I always told my students, because I've been coaching people for like most of my career as well. And I would always tell my students, I would always tell the other students that when someone was on the fence about fighting, that they have to make that choice. Yeah. Because even when someone's good and you know they don't believe in themselves, and you're like, dude, you're good, like you can't push them, because at that moment when they're walking out, they're not confident, because they're like, I didn't even want to do this. Yeah. These motherfuckers pushed me into it, you know, like for me, every time I felt that way, like, man, I could be somewhere else. Why am I doing this? I'm at a club in Tijuana, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, what am I doing here? But at that moment, I always told myself, hey, look, you asked for this. Yeah. You want to be tough and you want to ask this promoter and say, hey, give me this fight, and you sign the dotted line, you got to do it. Even if you get beat up, you got to do it. You asked for it. So I always just told myself that. And so the people that get talked into it, I feel are always going to be in a bad situation at that moment and go, man, I never wanted to do this in the first place.
Yeah, for me, it was more like just who I would fight and under the circumstances. I knew I wanted to fight. You know, when I was 8 years old, I was in Taekwondo. I didn't want to do the forms. I didn't want to break the boards and stuff like that. I wanted to spar all the time. So there was no doubt in my mind I wanted to fight. But when I would walk out to some of these, like, because I was like you, I fought on like Indian reservations and like, you know, all these things, and auditoriums from schools when they were closed on the weekend, and rodeo arenas and everything else. And for me, it was like in the beginning, the questions came in when I'm like walking out and I'm looking at the crowd, and that's who I'm entertaining. And, you know, it's these crazy guys drunk throwing beer cans, and I'm fighting a guy, like I said, like, you know, cut off shorts and mohawk, and, you know, tattoos everywhere. And, you know, nothing against tattoos, but back then, you know, it's like intimidating, you know, and I have no tattoos, you know, so it's like, you know, and I'm walking out there and I'm just like, what in the hell am I doing, man? Like, why am I fighting in this situation at a rodeo arena with these guys that don't even seem like I mean, this isn't like an audience that's going to sit there and clap, you know, when you do good. You know, so I was just like, what the hell am I doing? And then my problem is I would go in there and then I would win. And then once I would win that fight, then it would be like, oh, yeah. I didn't even care about who the audience was. I didn't care about anything else. It was just the alpha of like getting that win and beating that person that was trying to beat me. And so that's what kept me going through those rough years of just fighting any and everybody anywhere. And then it took me to the point where the fights got a lot more lucrative, they got a lot more exciting, and a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
rewarding. And so that's kind of what kept me going. So there's never a question about fighting, but there was definitely some questions of like, damn, what
Yeah.
why am I fighting here?
Yeah.
Like, and then when I'm looking ahead at like the UFC, the UFC at that time was like borderline. If it wasn't, it was borderline banned. I mean, I don't know exactly the timeline, but it's like banned, and like the best fighters in the world are getting like 20,000 a fight, 25,000. So it wasn't like there was nothing in the future that's gonna like make me a millionaire. But I just wanted to
Yeah.
fight and get the respect to being the best that I could be, and so that people could respect me in that regard, and then hopefully jump onto something else, later
Yeah.
on after the fighting career was over with. So yeah, that's crazy, man. But hats off
Yeah.
to you for fighting like you did. What was one of the biggest wins so far of your career where like maybe not the biggest win for like in your UFC career headed toward a goal, but like just where you just felt like, wow, like, I'm proud of myself, and this is, this is
Yeah.
why I got into it. This is why I went through all that hard work and trained for so long.
There's so many,
I know
people
you
ask
fought
me
so
this
many
question a
guys.
lot, and I tell people there's every fight's a different story. I posted about it recently. I fought one time a week before the fight. I broke my hand after training. I was drilling, and my training partners got a little bit, when you're peak shape and you're just like you're on point, and you're moving, and you look good. And sometimes if it's not like a really good training partner, they get a little bit like, they get their feelings hurt,
Yeah.
and you're like, dude, I'm not trying to like prove anything. I'm just trying to make sure I'm ready for the fight. Um, and so I ended up getting taken down up against the fence, and my finger got caught in the cage, and I broke my hand. Um, and so my hand blew up, and I decided to fight, and I went into the fight just freaking out, just knowing that I had a broken right hand. I had a powerful right hand. So I'm like, all right, I'm like, who do you think you are going to fight at this level with a jab and kicks, like, so, but going in there and winning the fight, like that was huge mentally, and then, my Doo Ho Choi fight, I was an underdog in the fight. He had been sleeping everybody in the first round. It was 18,000 people in the arena. I was backstage with Cowboy, and um, um, I was with Tim and Lando. It was like all the guys from Jackson's all in one like locker room, and it was so tense.
Yeah.
Everybody was so tense. It was crazy, and I was the first one that was supposed to set it off. So I'm like,
Yeah.
And then I got fight of the night for that, but I got fight of the year for that one. But after all of that, my wife told me we were having our first kid, so that
Oh,
one's
wow.
like, that night is just incredible. And then this last fight with Kron
Yeah.
was 15 years I've held a grudge against him, and it's funny because I don't think he ever really thought twice about me. But going back to my story of how I got into it, I was training under a Joe Moreira brown belt, and I started being able to kind of beat him when I was a blue belt. So I mean, he was a great instructor, but I felt like I was able to catch up to him really quick, and he's a super good dude. Really sad. He passed away. He was actually murdered. My jiu-jitsu instructor,
Oh, wow.
like a couple years ago, and they still haven't found who did it. He literally got executed at his front door.
Sucks.
So I've been having that on my shoulders for years, but he was my instructor, and he encouraged me. He was one of the best instructors I ever had. And I used to just go to jiu-jitsu tournaments, and I would go enter myself, and he never came because he worked on air conditionings all day, and then he trained jiu-jitsu at night, so he wasn't going to come with me. And it was just a passion for him. And so I would call him and say, hey, I won this tournament. Hey, I won this tournament. So I went to a tournament called the Pan Ams, and everyone told me not to go because I literally just got my blue belt, and they only allow blue belts and up. and they were saying everyone who's competing is about to be a purple. You shouldn't go. And I had only been training 1 year. So when I went, there was like 50 something people in my division. And I submitted everybody that I went against. I won. And so I called him on the way home, my old coach Ramon, and I was like, I won. And he just didn't believe me. I had to like come home and show him the medal. See, like, I won the Pan Ams. So the very next tournament I went to was the U.S. Open, and that's when I went against Kron. And he was 17, I think, and I was 20. And we had an epic battle, but I wasn't getting any points.
Yeah.
And so I lost by 1 point, and I was like, I was really annoyed. And so I used to read do you remember the Abu Dhabi website? Abu Dhabi, they used to have like
ADC Combat or something like that.
Yeah. So Kid Pellegro, who I was a big fan of because he wrote all the books, he wrote this big article on how Kron Gracie beat the Pan Am champ, and it crushed me. Like I'm from Palm Springs. Like there's literally 2 jiu-jitsu schools in town. My instructor's a brown belt. Like I've never even rolled with black belts at that point. Like I was just a kid from nowhere, and then I went against him, and they like tried to brag about beating me, so it just crushed me. Like, and then I wrote Kid Pellegro a pretty nasty email because I was just coming off of being a punk kid, and then I started getting people coming into my gym saying, "Hey man, our instructor told us to tell you that, hey, you should probably stop talking or you're going to get banned from competitions." And I was just like screw you guys, So I stopped competing after that pretty much, especially in the gi. And that was when I was 20 years old. I'm 36 now. So I always, had a thing against Kron, and just for that. And the funny thing is I don't think he ever really cared because he didn't, he's got the pressure living up to his dad and his grandfather and his whole family.
Right.
Like I don't know what that's like, but I just was upset that his story meant more to the jiu-jitsu community than me. And I'm like, well, why doesn't my story matter? Like, you just get to step on me, So that's how I took it, and I was bitter about it. So when they offered me the fight, I was like, yeah, I'll fight him. And then they asked me, they were like, why? And I was like, well, we have a little bit of a history. And they were like, really? And the UFC likes to book me fights when they know I'm motivated. So they were happy about it.
Yeah, well, I think a sweep with 3 judges saying 27-30 score is you settled it. I think that was I think you could close that chapter now. So that's good.
Because I was such a big jiu-jitsu fan. I still am. Like, I know the history of the Gracies. I watched all the Gracie in actions. I watched Murillo Bustamante videos. Anything people would give me. So they're all old cassette tapes. This is before YouTube. This is what I try to tell people. Now that you have YouTube, you have no excuse not to get good. A couple training partners and YouTube, like you can get good enough to make it to like a big gym and succeed. When we were coming up, like you had to go to seminars and you had to know people, and people were being like, "Hey, don't look at my stuff. These are secret moves," So it's a different environment.
I remember there was a website before YouTube, and there was this one guy that had like a collection of fight tapes. And he had this long list on his website of every, like the Gracies and every rare, the super brawls and the.
Was it like Bruto?
I don't know, but you could buy them from him, and then he would send you the VHS of these fights, and I would just buy those fights, man, because it was like the Gracies in action, or it was like these super brawl, whatever it was from Hawaii when it was that event in Hawaii. It was all these different events that like you didn't have access to see. But he had them all on VHS tape. He was a collector, and he would trade too if you had certain fights or whatever. So he had this massive collection, and that's how I got to see all those old school fights, was like through that. But going back to Kron real fast, when you were training for Kron, I heard this. Is this true that it was hard for you to find training partners to train for him because he was a Gracie? Was that difficult? Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, I go and bounce around and train at a bunch of schools, and the Gracie schools that I would go to, they just they told me, hey, for everybody involved, it's probably best you don't train here for this fight. And I was a little offended, and it's
Yeah.
like man, at this day and age, we're still getting this, and it just lit the fire because it reminded me of why I had the beef with them in the first place,
Mhm.
and uh, it just was like, man, these politics, oh, you're gonna single me out, like
Yeah.
like I know he trains boxing. I'm gonna have my boxing coach make some phone calls and say, hey, if you train him for this fight, we're gonna like block you from being in the sport of boxing. Like, do you want to play this game? But that's petty,
Yeah.
But that's how it felt, and yeah. So I was asked not to come to some schools, and I found out where it came from, and it's way up there.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
They just said that it's best that he doesn't come here, and I've been back to these schools, and they're all cool, but just for that fight, they didn't want me to come, so I had to go back to Palm Springs, and my jiu-jitsu instructors. I'm his most famous student, but there was a kid that's younger than me, Hurricane we call him, and I got him into it. So he was like very popular in high school, played sports and stuff, and I was like, man, you got to do jujitsu so my instructor told me he wouldn't charge me because I had not a lot of money. If
Yeah.
I brought in people and signed them up all the time, I didn't have to pay, and if I signed up enough people, he would start giving me like gis and like products and stuff. So he used to give me gis, and I would tell him, no, no, no. To me, it's more training partners. So he was one of them. Hurricane was one of them, and he's like phenomenal. Really good black belt in the desert. Not a lot of people know who he is because he's just down there. He competes here and there, and
Yeah.
but yeah, he's really good. So I brought him in for the camp, and he beat me up a lot. So it made me nervous for the fight. I was like, there's no way that he's this good, as good as the guy I was going with.
Yeah.
And I didn't think so. So I still don't think so. I feel like my buddy Hurricane is a monster that just people don't know about.
It's crazy, man. Yeah, a lot of we switch off in training at AKA like through the years. Like we would have to spar multiple guys. So we'd have one round with like say me and Fitch. Second round would
Yeah,
be like a fresh cost check. Third round would
yeah,
be like a fresh Jake Shields or something. So like I spent most of my last couple of weeks of training camp just getting the shit beat out of me, man. And like
yeah,
the confidence was still there because like I knew that I wasn't gonna be fighting three of the top five fighters in the
yeah,
world. But it was still like, it was like, damn, man, like I got the shit beat out of me, like in every
yeah.
area, between these guys. But you got to take it and go. But let me ask you a quick question. Since you're such a big fan of the old school kind of you were watching the Gracies in action, I'm sure you've seen the Valet Tudo Japans and stuff like that. How
hmm
was it? Was it any different, or was there any cool factor, or was there any feeling at all when you looked across the octagon for this Kron Gracie fight and you saw Hickson Gracie?
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I was focused on the fight, and I wish I could have like talked to him after because I am a big fan, but
Yeah.
I felt like maybe he didn't want to talk since there was a little bit of trash talk. But I mean, like, I, one of the biggest, one of the happiest moments when I was younger, I was at one of the tournaments, and I got to take a picture with Helio.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like man, I've been a fan of the family forever. Like, so
Yeah.
so it was awesome, but I got to focus on the fight. And after, I was like, man, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That I was able to do that, and with Hickson being there and everything. But yeah, probably not my biggest fan.
Yeah, no. And the good thing is he's tough, man. He's a good fighter, So I mean, it's not like he's gonna just go away. I mean, he's a tough fighter.
Yeah,
He took a lot of damage. He kept coming forward. He's got the heart of a warrior. So it's not like he's not going to be able to keep moving forward. But you did have a
yeah.
dominant performance. I wanted to ask you real fast. I didn't clarify when I asked you about your training in the beginning. But how old were you when you got into jujitsu? And so when you kind of started your martial arts, what age was that? If you said maybe I missed
19.
it. Okay, so you were 19.
I was
So
19, and so I had 1 year, and I turned pro at 20.
So you had no martial arts training before that,
Nothing.
just
Just
wow,
played soccer.
cool, man. And then you just got
Yeah,
into
yeah.
jujitsu and like were like just addicted.
Yeah, I mean, I had like maybe like 80 matches, jiu-jitsu matches before I fought. And then I even did a Muay Thai fight before I fought MMA because it was all I could get. Because I started training with a guy in Palm Springs that knew like Kung Fu and Muay Thai, like all these things. And I was like, well, I want to learn Muay Thai. And he's like, yeah, but I'll teach you Kung Fu and everything. So it probably wasn't the best for me, but I was hitting pads and stuff like that. But I had never sparred, and I got a fight I fought Toby Greer, who I can't stand. I fought Toby Greer at full rules Muay Thai, just no elbows, at Hollywood Park Casino, and I had never sparred before. And so he ended up catching me with a head kick in like the second or third round because he kept leg kicking me, and I was trying to kill him. And he ended up catching me with a head kick, and I lost that fight. I got TKO'd, and then I had finally had my first MMA fight, and I fought Shannon Gugerty, who was a Dean Lister guy, who was really good at jiu-jitsu. And so I was a Joe Moreira guy, a Dean Lister guy, and he beat me in 30 seconds. I got choked. So then everyone was telling me like, man, you know, maybe it's not for you. And it just made me super pissed and just made me train harder. And I won 11 in a row after that. And I didn't lose again until I fought Jens Pulver.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a beast back then too.
Yeah.
Your kicks are good, man. And even in the Kron fight, you were using good leg kicks and deep kicks and stuff like that. But if you happen to want to train some more Muay Thai, more specifically on an island in Thailand, I might know of a place you can go to, and you're more than welcome to come and enjoy some nice Muay Thai training and some beaches and some nice weather. And so I'm just putting it out there. If you decide you want to train a little more Muay Thai.
It's been a lifetime goal to get to Thailand, so I would absolutely love it.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, I would love to.
Yeah,
That sounds nice.
We'll stay in touch, man. And when you get the time, I want to get you out here and let you see the gym and everything and show you Phuket. All right, guys, I want to take a second to thank our sponsor, aka Thailand, the world's premier luxury training facility here in Phuket, Thailand. We are still currently holding our 30% reopen special if you book ahead. The quarantine is starting to let up a little bit. We're looking to open possibly June 15th, which is only a few weeks away from now. I'm not sure how long the sale is going to last at 30% off, but you can go to akthailand.com, and as long as the pricing page is still set up, you still save the money. You can book any group training for any period of time, a week to a month to a year. All group training is 30% off. There's no expiration date. You can transfer it. If later on you don't want to come and you want to send your friend, no problem. Send us an email. We'll change the name of the POS. Again, no expiration. So if whenever you want to come, and if you have any questions, email us at info@akthailand.com. And if you're not familiar with AK Thailand, here's the video for you.
What's up, everybody? I am here in Thailand. This is the first time I've ever been here. Been dying to come here for years. The great Mike Swick, he's one of the big reasons he's been trying to pull me down here. What he built down here, AKA Thailand, is incredible. There's people here from all over the world. You can train mixed martial arts here, jiu-jitsu. They have weightlifting, they have cardio, and obviously they have Muay Thai, boxing, everything. I'm telling you guys, I know everybody wants to go to Thailand because Thailand's so cool, but you can't come to Thailand without coming to AKA Thailand. Come on.
Was there a fighter so far? I mean, you fought so many people, it's hard to imagine, but has there been a fighter that you really wanted to fight, just stylistically or for any reason that you just haven't been able to match up against yet?
I mean, I'm the kind of person who wants to fight everybody.
Yeah, but there's not some reason why you want to fight like a specific person and just never have?
Let's see. I mean, honestly, I just wanted to fight for the title.
Yeah, of course.
That one got away from me a few times. Probably Conor
Yeah, that'd be a big one.
when he was a 45er. I was one of the first people he really tried to pick on, and we almost got into it a couple times, once in Ireland and once in Vegas. And he would just come up to me and talk shit, and I'm like, dude, like, we may fight, we may not, but like to come over here, sit next to me and start talking shit, like I'm not like gonna make a scene, like we're just gonna fight. Yeah. And we both stood up and it got broken up, and I'm just like, man, I just don't like this dude,
Yeah.
Because I came into the sport because I wanted to become a better person, because I had started to become a little shit, and I wanted to be a better person. My ultimate goal when I decided to pursue fighting was, look, my step grandpa used to tell me about stories of him boxing in the army, and he would tell me he got beat up all the time, and he would make jokes, and it was hilarious, right? But I just thought how cool it was that he was like fearless. And so I just thought to myself, like, at the end of the day, if I have cool stories to tell my grandkids, like that's cool. I'm cool with that.
Yeah, of course.
That's what kind of made me try it. And then when the Ultimate Fighter happened, I had already had a pro fight, and I was like, I don't see how this sport isn't the most popular sport in the world. I think people are just being dumb, and they'll eventually they'll get it, they'll understand. And when the Ultimate Fighter happened and it had good ratings, I was like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And when my career, takes off, that's when then the sport will be growing big. So I thought about it like that, like a smart business decision. Like I think this is more important than going to college for me.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah. since you've made such a name in fighting, and you've done so much, and you've won so many big fights and stuff, what is it that you want to do after fighting? Like, what's your end game? Like, what do you see yourself doing when this is all over? And as far as the competing aspect, and then finishing up your life.
I try to stay open-minded because I don't know what I'm going to do 100%. I own a couple of gyms, and I've dabbled in real estate. I have another house. I've been pretty good. I was fortunate enough to see a lot of fighters blowing a lot of money when I didn't have any, and so that always made me remember, like, don't be that guy,
right.
And like literally, it's been a fear of mine. I'm like, man, what's worse than becoming a great fighter and having nothing to show for it? Like, to me, that's like a failure in itself. It's like making it as hard of it, but staying on top financially is how you make a transition and you continue to be successful, not just at one thing, So like Kobe Bryant is somebody I looked up to, Magic Johnson, people that made more money after, So I definitely want to do public speaking. I definitely want to train guys. Like I still do. I love it. I love, sharing the knowledge I've occurred over the years, and talking to guys about the mental side of the game and all that. But I may get a job. I don't know. We'll see if I can make a good living with just doing like public speaking and training guys and doing little things here and there, then I'll be good. But if I have to get a regular job, then I don't mind. I've never thought of myself as being famous or being like too cool. Like I'm a normal person. I can work a regular job if I needed to. I feel like I don't think I'm nothing special, just somebody that worked really hard and was successful because I didn't give up.
Well, you definitely are special, man, and you're super humble. I mean, and I think that would be an awesome thing with your background and how you took yourself from where you were to where you are now, and in such a positive way, and impacted people. I think that's super, super important, and I think you could definitely be a good public speaker, man.
Well, thank you. I mean, I go talk to the kids at Juvenile Hall that I was in like often. I just did a Skype one a couple of days ago or last week, and they have me come in there all the time, and that's benefit for me because I get to remember where I was, and it's the same place. They're wearing the same uniforms. It's surreal, And I'm like, hey man, I was right there. And it could be frustrating though, because I'll try to drop some knowledge on these guys. Like, man, I've literally had conversations with billionaires, and met my heroes, and they recognized me before I met them. Like
that's cool.
I've been on Sports Center, and I've been in video game. I've been able to do some cool stuff that I've been very fortunate. And I try to give them some knowledge, and they're like, "You ever been knocked out?" It's like the questions. You're like, oh. Like, come on, man, ask me something that's going to change your life. Don't ask me something petty, But, that's where their mind is at, and so it reminds me of how far it's taken me from when I was that age to where I am now to evolve.
Yeah. I was speaking of what you said before, as far as guys blowing money, man. It was the same thing when I was coming up, and that's why I put everything into business and try to do it the smart way. And I had to learn the hard way too, because the problem is with fighters, and I think a lot of sports in general, if anyone wants to take from this, that's watching and listening, that are up and coming fighters, you only think positive when you're a fighter and you're winning fights. You only think you're going to get better and make more money. Am I wrong on that? So when you're making maybe you make 50 grand or 100 grand, whatever it is, you assume you're going to at least keep making that or more. So it's like that's your mindset all the time. So when you're out there spending money or deciding to do this or do that, that's that mindset you have. And I think that's probably the same with a lot of fighters. But in reality, it takes one fight to change that, or an injury or something like that. And then all that gets taken away. So it's like, it's super smart, man, when you're coming up, especially till you hit 40. I think 40 is when you start focusing on that alternative career and stuff. But until 40, I think it's smart to just put your money where it's going to benefit you. And like you did with your gyms and the houses and stuff. But like, a lot of people don't do that, man. They live that fast life and just buy all the fancy stuff because they think they're going to be the next Conor McGregor or whatever, and then all of a sudden it goes away, and then now you have all these bills to pay, and it goes fast. It goes super fast.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many lessons to be learned. Sometimes you get away and you can really think, and there's been times I've been able to really think and go, okay, how could I do better? How could I do better? And I do that about everything. And one of the ways I wanted to coach better is I was like, you know what? I've had a lot of guys that have done really well that exceeded my expectations of where I thought they would be. Like guys that just had no athletic ability but won a championship in a smaller organization. And I'm like, I don't think they're going to make it to the UFC, but I wouldn't tell them that because I wouldn't ruin their dream. And I'm telling them like, hey, you could go as far as you want. And guys like that, and then they retire and maybe get a little down on themselves because they don't know what they want to do with their life. But I feel like as coaches, we maybe need to do a better job at translating those gym lessons to life. It's like, man, you were coming in the gym and fighting people every day just to prove you were the man. And you can't do that at your new job.
Yeah,
just exactly. because you have a negative thought. You studied film and you did all these things that you were willing to go the extra mile for, but you won't study for your new job and think like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I should do some research and attack it the way I did fighting. Like you ran 8 miles every day, like you were a monster, but you won't do these things. Like it just doesn't translate for them. And I feel like I need to do a better job at coaching guys into that, knowing like, yes, it's about fighting. This is what we're doing. But remember, these are life lessons, wins, losses, how you spend your money, how you respond to somebody, and I mean, that's why I'm not with all the crap talking, the Colbys and the, Cejudos, like guys that are great, but just, they want the success now and they're willing to just kind of sell their souls. That's the way I see it,
Yep.
Like, man, I don't want to be remembered for that. I always said, I don't want to be walking my kids to school one day and go, oh man, you were such an asshole. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's like, hey, I was playing a part. Like, well, then why'd you do that? Be true to who you are, tell your story, fight hard. That's it.
And it doesn't translate to business either, man. Like, I mean, if you look at Conor, like he's hurting his business every time he does something stupid. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't translate to business. So a lot of these guys are taking this approach to like, you know, be this crazy heel and be disrespectful and just to get the attention so they can have a better fight career. And then when the fight career is over, it doesn't translate. I mean, whether you're doing public speaking or whether you're doing some other type of business, you're running gyms or you're getting into other things, it doesn't translate. People don't have that respect for you as much, you know, and not even mentioning your children and your family and things like that. So that was a give or take I had, because I was on The Ultimate Fighter and I wasn't controversial. I wasn't trying to like be the showboat, and I didn't get much attention for it. You know, I wasn't like a superstar coming off The Ultimate Fighter. And even throughout my career, I had to win fights by knockout and earn it that way, because I wasn't out there like running my mouth and stuff. But I would rather take that trade any day of the week now that I have the respect that I do from my peers and from so many people that I associated with in my career and now in business, because they don't look at me as this asshole. Whether, you know, a lot of these guys aren't even assholes, and some of them obviously are, but they don't look at me that way because I never projected that. So you're so correct with that, man. I think you're on the right track, and you sound like a motivational speaker already, man. And I think this interview is really going to show that, man, because you're very inspirational, man, for sure.
Well, thank you. I practiced a little bit. I was terrible, but I've done everything from talk to kids. I've talked to 13-year-old kids that are on death row to read school books to elementary school.
Yeah,
you know, so I've done a lot of different talks, but yeah, I just enjoy it because any way I can motivate anybody, I just think it's cool. I think
sure.
I think I have a cool story, and I always felt like a moral obligation to share it, because I feel like there's people that dedicate their lives to helping kids, being social workers and things like that, and they don't have the story I do, and they'll listen to me because I'm cool, you know, I'm a fighter. And then I came from somewhere that was very hard. So I'm like, man, if you don't go and get over your fear, because public speaking is something that I never wanted to do. I was a super shy kid, and I didn't like being in the spotlight, strangely enough. So yeah, it's something I had to get better at over the years. But may I add that you and Forrest Griffin were my favorite on The Ultimate Fighter. By far.
Cool.
I like your both your personalities, and I've gotten to know Forrest quite a bit over the years. He's hilarious. But yeah, we never talked. I think maybe one or two times briefly, but yeah, you were one of my favorites. Still one of my favorites.
Thanks, man. So somebody noticed me on The Ultimate Fighter, and it's actually somebody that I admire and look up to too. So I should appreciate that.
Yeah, you know, like Koscheck, I'm a fan of his, but I didn't like the way they portrayed him on the show. You know, trying to think, I think Bobby Southworth, was he kind of one of the other ones being kind of a prick?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just didn't like that. You know, where I came from, we only bullied bullies. You know.
Yeah.
Like we got into fights with people that wanted. That we had problems with, but I didn't never pick on anybody for no reason. I just thought that was petty, you know?
Yeah, it's funny because like on the TV show, like Bobby Southworth was, you know, he was being a dick on the show with Koscheck, and they formed a little thing, but Bobby was my teammate. Koscheck was my teammate too, but we just never trained together. He had just became an AKA guy right before the show, so we never really knew each other that well. But Bobby was my teammate for like a while before the TV show. And that put a divide between us because he was doing all that stuff. And then when he started picking on Lieben was my only loss prior to that show. And it was a devastating loss to me. And he was disrespectful to me, you know, leading up to that. And it was WC actually, leading up to that and the loss and post loss and on the TV show, he was disrespectful to me. But at the same time, when Bobby and Koscheck started messing with Lieben and going overboard, I had Lieben's side. You know, I took Lieben's side and was trying to break it up and sort it out, because I don't know, that just kind of shows you my level of like not trying to get into the controversy. And I try to take sides of like who's right versus like who I might not like as much. You know what I mean? Because I'm out of the equation. This situation that's going on right now is not about me. And it wasn't fair to Lieben how he was being treated at that time. So I kind of took his back. But yeah, that's crazy how that kind of worked out and everything. But Yeah, no, I love the way you act, man, and your demeanor, and I think you're going to be a great motivational speaker. I want to touch on this real fast. So you obviously you watch UFC 249, I'm sure, and some of these fights since then. How was it like what do you think about those fights being with no audience and Fight Island and stuff? I don't know your timeline for coming back, but do you think that was a great move? And are you looking forward to possibly fighting on a card like that if this pandemic stays? Or what do you think? What's your thoughts on those fights?
Originally, me and my wife, my wife works for the company too, and
Yep.
we were both kind of like, man, I feel like they shouldn't be putting these on. We were pretty concerned with everything, and we were quarantining because we have kids that have been in the hospital for respiratory stuff. Oh, wow. And so it was a concern for us. And she didn't go to work one show before they canceled, before anybody else. She was like, I don't want to risk it. And I was already injured. But since everything, the last few cards, I've been 100% on board. I'm like, you know what? They're doing the right things. They're trying hard. My hat's off to them, because even in the last financial crisis, everybody was hurting, and I was still, like it didn't affect me at all. I felt bad for everyone I knew. I'm like one of the only jobs that's booming, Once again, we're in a situation where all the fighters are still able to make money. I think it's awesome. The thing that it's no crowd is interesting. And every fight that's happened so far, the cards have been brutal. Yeah. And I'm like, is there something to that?
It is something. It's weird, but yeah, there is something to that, I think.
Yeah, broken orbitals, and and that's something that I've spoke on before that I'm not too big on. When I lost to Frankie the first time we fought, he beat me up real good, and it made me question. I had vertigo for a few weeks, which I'd never experienced. And so I remember getting out of bed every day and just kind of like almost falling over. If I ever like leaned over to grab something, I'd fall over. And it just was like, man, it made me kind of rethink being tough, because if you're tough, you'll make it pretty far in the sport. But when you get to the top, everyone's tough. So if you rely on being tough, you're going to lose some brain cells and you're going to have a hard life, Yeah. So it kind of bums me out that our sport isn't too big on throwing in towels. It's all like, I've been to some states where they're like, if you throw the towel in, I will throw it back at you. I've heard referees say that. Wow. And I'm like, what? Like at boxing, we see that as kind of brutal, like a more brutal sport, and they throw in towels all the time, and their losses mean way more than our losses. In our sport, losses aren't as big of a deal. You bounce back. In boxing, you lose one or two, your career could be over, and they throw in towels. So it's like, to me, sometimes I think that we need to be better, as a sport. We're still, some aspects of our sport are still from the 90s. You're like, come on. Yeah. We don't even have our own scoring system.
Yeah, and that damage that you take during these fights, like boxers obviously have done a lot more research and are ahead of the game on that. Those are long term, you know what I mean? So it's not necessarily when you walk out of the ring, it's like you get checked out by the doctor and you're like, oh, he's okay. It's long term, man. It takes sometimes years for that stuff to settle in. What was your thoughts on that Teixeira fight then, as far as the talent should have been thrown out? I 100% thought so too.
I thought it should be stopped, and then I thought that it was a good move by Herzog to apologize, because he's a great ref. He was actually my referee when I fought in Tijuana back in the day. So I've known him for a long time. I think he's a great ref, a good person. I thought it was cool he apologized, and I thought Anthony Smith kind of telling him he was wrong for apologizing is just a fighter being stubborn. Yeah. It's like, dude, because this is the way I explained it. The first round, okay, he lost to John, and you fall short. Every fighter has to build up in their mind that I'm the best in the world to fight, to be, to fight for the belt and think I'm the best in the world. You lost. Okay. I have to be better. So he goes back to the gym. He tries to be better. During those camps, you go, man, I'm better than the guy when I fought for the title. I believe that if I get another shot, I will win. And you start to, get that momentum going, right? In the beginning of that fight, he looked so sharp. I was like, man, he's motivated. He's better than he was before. This is a new Anthony Smith. And then they kept talking about the pace he was keeping, and I was like, okay. that he is quite a high pace, but he's in Colorado. He's at high altitude. I wonder if he can maintain it. Then he hit a wall, right? Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, this is bad. And then when he started taking those shots, I'm like, okay, they need to stop this immediately.
Yeah.
And because they didn't stop it, I believe he's like 4 fights away from mentally being back to where he was. And that's just my opinion, being a coach myself and being a fighter as well. When you take a beating like that, he didn't take a beating like that against John Jones, you know? Yeah. So it's like now you set yourself back so far when you were just the best fighter you had ever been 5 minutes ago. And now you just took yourself back. And I think his coaches are great too. Great coaches. But sometimes you really want your guy to get it. So
and I don't care what people say as far as like you get a knockout and you celebrate and everyone's like, all right, great knockout, and they don't even think about the fact the guy got knocked out. He gets up, everything's whatever. They go back to the locker room. But no matter what happens, when you take a hit and get rocked or you get knocked out, you're taking long-term damage. I mean, it's going to be long-term damage. Whether it's a small amount that's going to affect you or not, that's questionable. But you're going to take damage. You are taking damage that's going to last for the rest of your life to some degree. And then when you're sitting there out there like that with Teixeira punching you over and over and over and over, I think whatever whatever Smith says after that's just irrelevant because he's a fighter. Yeah. He's going to say what he thinks, but he doesn't know what's going to happen to him in 5 years or 10 years or whatever the case is. So, in a fight like that, I thought definitely it should be stopped. And that was just an enormous amount of damage when he could just pick himself back up and accept it, come back and fight strong the next time. Who knows what's going to happen the next time now, because of a fight like that.
Yeah, you don't. And I mean, and I speak from experience because I had the Frankie fight and I got beat up pretty good. And then I was so mad because I was on such a win streak. I wanted to fight again and they offered me Holloway and he was on like a 9-fight win streak. He was on a roll. And I was like, yeah, it's fine. He's a stand-up guy. I've always done good against taller strikers. Cool. Then he comes out and he fights me a completely different style than I had watched him tape. And I'm kind of like watching him and he's just firing off and running, firing and running. And I'm just blocking, trying to figure him out. And I'm like, man, I'm losing this fight. So I swing as hard as I can just to try to get him to like stop his rhythm. And I shatter my thumb. So then I'm like, all right, like just keep going. And it was at the very end of the round. So second round, we're going in. I start tagging him with just my jab. I throw a jab. I kind of snap his head back and I follow up with a hook and I miss and he counters me, catches me right in the jaw and breaks my jaw. And I'm just like, damn it. And I'm just like got a broken jaw and a shattered thumb. And I'm like, man, and I shouldn't have kept fighting, but I fought another round and a half because I just, I'm a dumb fighter. It's our job is to keep going.
You're just a fighter, man. Like that. Your mission when you get out there is to go. You're not out there to stop or think about reasons to stop. Those are the guys that quit.
And I didn't tell my coaches because they kept coming in to check my cuts. And I was like, I don't want to get the fight stopped. So I just didn't say anything. And they're like, throw your right hand. And I was like, okay. And I like couldn't even move my jaw. And I even fought off like 2 chokes and then I got, ridiculed for the loss. And I'm just like, man, fuck you guys. Had a broken jaw and it's like, you hit a low point and I had to take a year off. I actually went to Peru with one of my buddies and did this long hike and tried to really fall back in love with it. And I did. And I came back stronger. And people were tripping out. They're like, how'd you come back stronger? I was like, man, I just stepped away from the equation, thought about everything. But when I think about everything, I think about, like, I've had my manager and my coaches, like, rip me apart. You did this. Why did you do that? And then telling me about what I did wrong. And I go, okay, I understand. I'm sorry. You're right. I fell short. I should have trained harder. I should have did this. I should have listened here. But I was like, no, let me return the favor. I think that advice you gave me in the second round was bullshit. I didn't like the way you did that. I think we need to prepare better for that. For now on, when we spar like this, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to do this, this, and this. And I just took more control of my career. The whole Shark Tank thing that you said, I used to, when I would train with Joe and help him get ready, I used to get Shark Tanked by him, Tyson Griffin, and Gray Maynard. And I wasn't even in the big show, you know. But now I tell people, no. If I'm going to do all that body work against my training partner in the first round, and then you try to take him away and give me somebody fresh, fuck that. Like, no. We're going to go another round. I'll go more rounds, but I'm going to spar this guy again. He's hurting right now. I just did all the work you do in a first round. I beat up his body. I beat up his legs. Yeah. Now I'm going to take him out. And that's what I would do. In the second round, I would try to hit him to the body, make him quit, tap him, whatever. Now give me somebody else. Don't give me that Shark Tank crap, you know, where it's somebody fresh where I'm never winning, you know. Yeah. I need to know that these moves are working. I need assurance, you know. Yeah, so smart. It made me completely change the way I train, you know.
And it's going to help your longevity. It's going to help your longevity too.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't safe for us. I mean, that's why we were injured all the time. I'm probably one of the most injured guys. Dana used to always laugh at me and make jokes, and even when they did these action figures for the UFC in this first series. And it was like, I was just coming up. I had just won like maybe 3 or 4 fights in the UFC or something. And Dana's like, we're going to get you on an action figure in this first series. And I mean, there were so many guys way bigger than me, you know, and I was like, holy shit, I was like blown away. And he's like, but the only issue is we're going to make yours injured because you've missed so many fights. So, you know, they all have their own little like thing to them, you know, and yours is going to be injured. And he made me think that, man. He made me think that for like 4 months or something. And I was like, I was excited, but like bummed out the whole time until it finally came out and it wasn't injured. And even when I opened it, I still thought when I opened it, it was like an arm was going to fall off or something. Like, he got me good. But dude, going back, long story short, the Shark Tank training and the hard training that we did back in the day was where I got the most injured and took the most damage in my career. And like the longevity is not there for that. So it's good that you got smart. And another person that does that really well is Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley trains a lot smarter now. He's been training with us before his fights. He was supposed to have a fight with Edwards, but he's going to start his fight camps with us here in Thailand. And he came and trained with us twice already. And he does the same thing. You know, he trains smart and not beating himself up so much, you know. So you know.
And another thing I started doing was I didn't have control of my schedule, and I don't like that because I know my body, I know how I feel, and I would always we would do conditioning and then spar the next day, and I'm like, fuck that. Like, why would I do that? I'm a spar when I'm fresh, and I only spar when I'm fresh, like hard. Like, I'll spar light and do drill and scenarios when I'm tired, but if we're going to spar and we're going hard, we're gearing up and going, I need to be fresh because
absolutely
I'm losing brain cells. I need to be able to move, you know? So if I'm going to if I choose one class to do when I'm done, it's conditioning, because you can push through that. I'm competing against myself. If I lose to myself, well, I'll do better the next time. But if I do terrible sparring, I'm getting the crap beat out of me, and that just kills makes me think, am I ready for this fight? It just creates bad scenarios and little dark clouds that you don't need, you know. So I don't do any of that. I think it's foolish, you know. I look back and I'm like, ah.
Well, it's good to see you're training smart like that now, and especially coming from the old school. You've managed to get away from those old ways, whereas a lot of the old school guys, they're stuck in that way, and they do it all the way to the end, and then they can't walk, you know. And like, it's good to see you make that change and be smart enough to make that change.
I think that hard training is important to weed out the weenies, you know, the wannabes, the guys that are just trying to be tough. You can weed those guys out, but then once you see like the thoroughbreds that made it through, and you're like, yo, these guys got it. You know, let's teach you about your body. Let's teach you about nutrition. Let's teach you about this. Let's get you educated. Let me teach you about how to spend your money. Let me teach you about marketing yourself. Let me teach you about how to pick a manager and who to trust and how people are trying to screw you over. You know, like, I try to do all that kind of stuff. And, practice doing interviews, taking pictures. Like I try to educate them on everything, because there's so much to learn. And when I talk to kids, I tell them the same thing. Like, you think that doing what I do is just like being tough. Like, man, I've had to learn about finances. I learned how to play golf just so I could talk to rich people, you know, just so I could relate. just so I could say, hey man, let's go play. And it
Yep.
turned out to be something I really enjoy now, like, yeah, there's so much that you could build off of, and to think narrow-mindedly, like, oh yeah, I'm just, there's always going to be a Mike Perry and a Chris Lieben and, and guys that can just knock people out, and they're just like, but for the majority of us, you're going to have to learn to be smart.
Yeah, man. Well, before I let you go real fast, I got to ask you what you thought about Gaethje versus Ferguson, and then how do you think Gaethje's going to match up with Khabib?
I'm excited for that fight.
It's a crazy fight, man.
Yeah, I met Gaethje. I actually went to his college and wrestled there with him, and didn't even know. He just said he did like a Throwback Thursday and posted a picture of us, and I was like, he was there.
Yeah.
So it was kind of crazy to me, just seeing him before he was even fighting. But he's an amazing fighter, and always exciting to watch. I thought the fight with Ferguson was awesome. Felt bad for Tony in that one. I feel like they should have stopped that fight a little sooner too. But I'm excited for Gaethje against Khabib. I'd like to see Khabib in a hard fight. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see him get really, really pushed. So we'll see. But Khabib's been pretty unstoppable so far.
Yeah, I'm biased because, Khabib's AK and everything, but I've always said, even before the Ferguson fight, that Gaethje's going to be, I think, one of his toughest fights and most scary fights for us to have. And it's like the most perfect example and the biggest example of like a striker versus a grappler. I mean, you're talking about a devastating striker who throws from all different angles, super hard, and doesn't care about getting hit, versus a grappler that's relentless, and if he gets you down, it's gonna, you know what I mean? Like it's literally just such a whole nother level of grappler versus striker match, So that's gonna be, I'm excited to see it too, and that's definitely gonna be a test for Khabib to secure himself. If he beats Gaethje, I think he definitely secures himself as the best, that's ever.
I definitely don't want to see Conor and Khabib, that fight.
Yeah, not again.
I have no interest in it. I don't know why they talk about it. Like, I like seeing good matchups. I want to see Conor fight Masvidal. I want to see him fight the good strikers. Let's see those fights. I generally am not a fan of the opposite style fights that our sport is built on, striker grappler, because they don't, a lot of times they can be snooze fest, but that one in particular, I don't think will be.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think it's gonna be a good one, man. And listen, man, I've already taken up a lot of your time, man, and I really appreciate you giving me that time. It's been great talking to you, man. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, and we've never really had the conversation before, and you're so inspiring. It's perfect what you want to do after fighting, man, because you're going to be a perfect fit. I think anybody that sees this interview will agree. You've been through a lot, and you've turned it all into a positive, and you've had so much success with it, and you just keep going, man. So it's an honor to have you on my show, and thank you for giving me this time in this conversation. I really appreciate it, and I think the fans and the followers are going to really appreciate it as well.
Well, I'll tell you, I was a fan of yours first, and I've always said this, that the only time I really can take a compliment is when it's from my peers. So, when I like met guys like you and Forrest and, other fighters that I was watching before I got in the big show tell me like that they're fans of mine or they like my fights, like to me that's the highest honor, when you get honored by your peers. So I appreciate it, and it was a pleasure talking to you, and I'd love to come out there sometime.
Yeah, I feel the same way, man. Like I said, it's an honor to hear you say that to me, after seeing all your fights and the life you lead and everything. So I appreciate it, man. And when you do come out to Thailand, let me know. I'll show you the best time, man. Phuket's amazing. AK Thailand is amazing. You're going to have a fun time, man. And we'll definitely make some experiences out here.
All right. Well, sounds good.
All right, brother. Take care. Stay safe. And I'll talk to you. I have to have you on the show again, man, when you get ready for another fight.
Cool, I'd love to. Yeah. Like I said, some of the media people, I just, with the questions, they can get a little boring for me. So I only
Yeah.
pick and choose who I want to do interviews with. And any former fighter, you know, call you a former fighter, but anybody who's been in the situation and can understand, I appreciate where you're coming from, your questions a little bit more. I know you won't ask me the dumb questions, so I appreciate you. I'd love to be on anytime.
Thank you so much, man. All right, thank you, and I appreciate being on the show, and I'll talk to you next time.
All right. See you
Good luck,
later.
man. Heal up your leg.
I will. I'll be back
Heal
by
it
the
up,
end
man.
of the summer, by the end of the year, and I promise that I'll be better than I've ever been. Promise.
I want to see you fight again, and I trust what you say. I think you will be, and I can't wait to see it.
All right.
All right, take
Later.
care. All right, well, there you have it, Cub Swanson. There's not much to wrap up. We covered everything, and man, it was so good to get his full story out because I've always wanted to know it myself. You know, I've always been a big fan of his. He's old school. He's been fighting for so long. He's fought everybody. And to find out where he came from and what he was doing up until 19, and then how he turned his life around and is now fighting top tier fighters in the UFC and has been for many years. You know, and now coming off this big win, who knows what's going to be in his future. Super inspirational for myself. It was an honor to hear him give me this time and credit me as someone that he looked up to and that he watched, because it's the same for him. You know, I look up to him and I love watching his fights as well. And it's hard not to like a man who gets fight of the night every fight almost. So great fighter, great person. You know, I wish the best for him and his family, and I hope he has a speedy recovery. Hope you guys took a lot from it. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Subscribe. If you're listening on audio, Stitcher, SoundCloud, iTunes, Spotify, subscribe, and give us a rating. If it's on iTunes, give us that 5-star rating. We're 5-star rated on there. I appreciate you listening and watching, and I'll see you next time.